She thought her affair was buried forever, until one night proved it was never hidden at all. What would you do if the person you trusted most knew your secret before you ever confessed it? Behind closed doors, lies were being watched, recorded, and quietly turned into weapons. And as the truth crept closer to the surface, one discovery would shatter a marriage and lead to a night no one would walk away from the same. Welcome back to Hidden Truths, True Crime Stories. Subscribe and watch the full story now. Catherine's mornings were always the same. The scent of fresh coffee, the hum of soft music from the kitchen, and the ritual of arranging the dining table just so, as if perfection could hold reality at bay. She moved through the house with practiced grace, a smile lingering faintly on her lips, but her eyes betrayed a hint of unease. Behind the polished veneer of suburban bliss, a storm was quietly building. Her husband, Cole, had already left for work, briefcase in hand, exchanging nothing more than a passing nod with her in the hallway. Their relationship, for all appearances, was flawless. To the outside world, they were the picture of a perfect couple, smiling at neighbors, hosting barbecues, attending church functions together. But behind closed doors, cracks were forming, invisible yet undeniable. Catherine paused at the mirror in the hallway, adjusting the collar of her blouse. She caught her reflection, studying the subtle tension in her jaw, the way her eyes darted at fleeting shadows. The house was empty, yet it carried a strange weight, as though it knew the secrets she harbored. She had managed to keep her double life hidden with meticulous care, scheduling her encounters, deleting messages, and fabricating alibis that never failed. But recently, even her own reflection seemed to judge her, whispering reminders of the life she was leading and the risks she was taking. The guilt had a presence of its own, lurking in the corners, persistent and insidious. Cole, in contrast, was entirely unaware. He had always trusted Catherine implicitly, attributing her occasional evasions to stress or the demands of family life. He was devoted, hardworking, and loyal, a man who believed in the sanctity of the home he had built. Every morning he kissed her cheek, said, "Have a good day," and left, unaware of the secrets ticking quietly beneath the surface. Catherine watched him go from the window, feeling a pang of both affection and dread. She loved him in her own conflicted way, yet she was tethered to a life she could not abandon, a passion she could not extinguish. The quiet moments stretched on, the house almost unnaturally silent. Catherine moved from room to room, straightening cushions, arranging flowers, pretending that the ordinary domesticity was enough to drown out her anxiety. The narrative of perfection she presented to the world was carefully curated, every detail a layer of deception. The smiles, the polite conversation with neighbors, the laughter during dinner parties, all performed with precision. It was exhausting, but it was necessary. Perfection had to be maintained at all costs. She had learned that appearances were everything, especially in a neighborhood where gossip spread faster than the evening breeze. As Catherine placed the last cup on the table, her phone buzzed softly in the living room. She froze, heart skipping a beat. It was an encrypted message she had long forgotten, one that seemed trivial at first, but carried a weight she could not ignore. Her pulse quickened as she read the screen, a tiny shiver crawling up her spine. The reminder was simple, almost innocuous, but it carried the undeniable truth. Her carefully constructed world was not as hidden as she believed. Someone knew, or would soon know, the secret she had nurtured for months. The storm she had feared was no longer a distant shadow, it was approaching, and nothing could stop it. Catherine's hand trembled slightly as she set the phone down. She took a deep breath, forcing a calm she did not feel. The day ahead would be ordinary, routine, but beneath the surface the tension was mounting. The first cracks had begun to show, and Cole's oblivion was only temporary. Soon, he would notice, and the collision of truth and deception would be inevitable. She couldn't shake the message from her mind. Someone was watching. And tonight, when she met him again, the life she thought she controlled would begin to unravel. The bedroom was dim, lit only by the fading glow of the bedside lamp. Catherine sat on the edge of the bed, phone clutched tightly in her hand, staring at the conversation that had reappeared hours ago. Daniel's message blinked insistently. "We need to see each other tonight. Don't disappoint me." Her chest tightened, guilt mingling with desire in a confusing, suffocating knot. She had promised herself that these encounters would remain controlled, calculated, but control was an illusion. Every meeting, every stolen kiss, every whispered word pushed her closer to a precipice she could no longer see. Cole's absence that day had given her the freedom she craved. She had paced the kitchen, arranged flowers in perfect symmetry, smiled politely at neighbors, all while Daniel's words echoed in her mind. She replayed their last encounter over and over, the touch of his hand, the way he looked at her with a possessive hunger she both hated and craved. Catherine's reflection in the mirror caught her eye again. The woman staring back at her seemed like a stranger. She wondered if she could continue living between two worlds, one of domestic perfection, the other of reckless indulgence. A soft creak of the floorboards jolted her out of thought. She froze, heart hammering. Even in the empty house, shadows moved like predators. She tried to convince herself it was nothing, the house settling, the wind whispering through the curtains, but the unease remained. Catherine knew she was being careless. Daniel's demands were escalating, and the fear of discovery had begun to claw at her confidence. Each night, she replayed the risks, calculating whether the thrill was worth the imminent danger. The phone buzzed again, a sharper vibration that sent a jolt through her arm. She read the latest message. "Tonight, don't fail me." Her hand trembled as she typed a response, fingers hovering, then pressing send before she could reconsider. The act itself felt like a confession, a surrender to the chaos she had tried so hard to contain. She dropped the phone onto the bed, breathing heavily, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. Outside, the streetlights flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced across the walls, mimicking the unrest in her mind. Cole's absence had created a quiet space for reflection, yet Catherine found no comfort in it. The memory of his smile that morning, the way he had kissed her cheek without suspicion, gnawed at her conscience. She hated herself for lying, for hiding, for betraying the trust that had been placed in her so blindly. Yet she also hated the ache of desire that refused to let her go. The room felt smaller, closing in on her, suffocating. Each shadow seemed alive, creeping closer, whispering reminders of her guilt. She rose slowly and walked to the window, gazing at the quiet street below. Couples walked hand in hand, neighbors waved, dogs barked, all oblivious to the storm brewing within her own home. The irony was almost cruel. Catherine's life appeared perfect, controlled, orderly, yet every step she took toward Daniel was a step toward chaos. She could feel the tension building, like a rope tightening around her chest. Every heartbeat reminded her that her secret world was fragile, and one misstep could shatter it all. Finally, she returned to the bed, picking up the phone once more. She scrolled through Daniel's messages, each one a spark of temptation she couldn't resist. Her hands shook and she whispered to herself a barely audible confession, "I can't keep doing this, but I can't stop either." The weight of her choices pressed down on her, dark and relentless. Every plan she had made to keep her life separate now felt inadequate. As Catherine prepared for tonight's meeting with Daniel, a sudden flicker of headlights outside caught her eye. Someone was parked across the street, watching. Her pulse raced. The shadow she had feared for so long was no longer imaginary. It was real. Cole returned home later than usual, the day's work leaving him drained but strangely alert. Something in the air felt off, though he couldn't yet pinpoint it. The house was quiet, too quiet, as if it was holding its breath. As he hung his coat, his eyes swept the familiar living room, taking in the subtle details that now seemed unusual. A cushion slightly out of place, a magazine turned at an odd angle, a faint smell of perfume lingering where none should have been. His mind, normally calm and methodical, began to churn with suspicion, each small anomaly weaving a growing thread of unease. He made his way to the bedroom, hoping to find Catherine there, perhaps preparing dinner or settling after her day. The room appeared empty, the bed neatly made, but something nagged at him. His eyes fell upon the nightstand, and for the first time he noticed a small slip of paper partially tucked beneath a lamp. He picked it up carefully, turning it over in his hands. It was a receipt from a nearby hotel, time-stamped just the night before. The handwriting was familiar, Catherine's unmistakable script. His pulse quickened, disbelief mingling with a rising, bitter anger. Cole's first reaction was denial. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to calm the storm of thoughts threatening to overtake him. Perhaps there was an innocent explanation, some mundane reason for the receipt. Yet as he examined it further, the edges of truth began to crack his certainty. The pattern was too deliberate, too precise to be a coincidence. He remembered the odd behaviors over the past weeks. Late-night phone calls, her distracted demeanor, the distant look in her eyes. Suddenly, the quiet unease of the day transformed into something heavier, something dark and foreboding. He started to review her phone habits. Catherine had always been careful, but subtle signs were emerging now. A second phone she claimed was for work, text messages that disappeared before he could see them, encrypted apps he had never noticed. Cole's mind raced as he considered the implications. His wife, the woman he trusted implicitly, was no longer entirely hers to protect. Every action, every detail he had ignored, now formed a pattern too disturbing to dismiss. As he moved through the house, he discovered more anomalies. A lipstick-stained glass hidden behind books, receipts for late-night dinners that didn't involve him, and small, seemingly inconsequential notes with initials he didn't recognize. Each piece of evidence felt like a hammer striking at the foundation of his reality. The careful life he had built, the illusion of marital security, was crumbling in silence around him. Cole felt the walls close in, the familiar rooms of his home turning into a labyrinth of betrayal. He retreated to the study, sitting heavily in the leather chair, piecing together the timeline in his mind. Late nights, unusual phone activity, secret messages, all pointed to a reality he could no longer ignore. His thoughts tumbled over one another, mixing disbelief with anger, hurt, and an urgent need for answers. He realized he could no longer remain passive. Action was inevitable. Cole's attention shifted to a small digital camera he had overlooked on a shelf. He remembered Catherine's habit of taking photos during her outings, innocuous snapshots he had dismissed. With trembling hands, he powered it on, scrolling through images. There, among ordinary pictures of flowers and neighborhood streets, were photographs of Catherine and a man he didn't recognize, intimate, unguarded proof of the life she had been hiding. Each photo struck him harder than the last, a silent testament to the betrayal that had been unfolding under his nose. Cole set the camera down slowly, heart pounding. He realized he was holding the evidence that could shatter everything, the hidden truth of Catherine's life. And somewhere in the quiet shadows of the house, he felt the first pulse of fear. What would she do if she knew he had discovered it all? Catherine sat on the edge of the small sofa in Laura's living room, hands clenched tightly in her lap, knuckles white. The soft hum of the television and the muted ticking of a wall clock did little to calm the storm inside her. Laura, her closest friend since college, sipped her coffee in silence, sensing the tension but unwilling to push too soon. Catherine's eyes darted around the room, unable to meet anyone's gaze, as though the walls themselves might expose her secret. Finally, in a trembling voice, she spoke. I don't know how to keep doing this, Catherine admitted, her words barely above a whisper. Everything I thought I was, it's all wrong. I can't stop thinking about him, and I don't know what to do. Her confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, like smoke that refused to disperse. Laura set her cup down, leaning forward slightly, eyes wide but steady. Who, Cat? Laura asked softly, careful to maintain calm. Who are you talking about? Catherine's throat tightened. She had rehearsed this moment countless times in her head, but never imagined the words would feel this heavy. Daniel, she said finally. I've been seeing him for months. I've been hiding it from Cole, from everyone. I don't know how to fix it, and I feel like I'm losing myself. Laura's expression shifted, a mixture of concern and disbelief crossing her features. Catherine, this is serious. Have you thought about what could happen if Cole finds out? Catherine nodded miserably. Every day, but I can't stop, and now I think he might already know. There are signs, things Cole has noticed, and I feel like the walls are closing in. I'm scared, Laura. I don't know what to do next. Her voice cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. She had finally unburdened herself to someone she trusted, yet the relief she had imagined felt fragile and fleeting. Laura reached out, taking Catherine's trembling hands in her own. Okay, we need to think carefully. You can't just keep running, you have to face it. But first, we need to understand what's already exposed. Cole may have noticed more than you realize. Her tone was calm, deliberate, and unnervingly practical. Catherine hated that clarity. It made her fear reality even more, the inevitability of consequences looming like a dark cloud. Catherine pressed her face into her hands, shaking, overwhelmed by guilt and fear. The comfort of Laura's presence barely held back the panic that surged through her. I don't know if I can ever make it right, she whispered. I've betrayed everything he trusts in me. I love Cole, I love him, but I can't stop thinking about Daniel. I hate myself for it. Laura stayed silent for a moment, letting the weight of Catherine's confession settle. Then, gently, she asked, Do you want to tell him, or should someone else find out first? The question made Catherine flinch. The thought of Cole discovering her secret before she could control the narrative terrified her. She shook her head. No, I'm not ready. I thought I could keep it hidden forever. But I know now it's too late. Everything is already spiraling. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with unspoken tension. Outside, a car passed slowly, headlights cutting across the window like a warning. Catherine glanced toward the street, shivering despite the warmth of the living room. The confession had not liberated her. It had only brought the truth closer, sharpening its edge, making the inevitable collision unavoidable. As she left Laura's house and walked back to her car, Catherine's phone buzzed once more. A message appeared, simple and menacing. "I know what you've done. It's only a matter of time before he finds out." Her heart sank. The first confession had been to a friend, but the real reckoning was yet to come. Cole barely slept that night. The image of Catherine's smile from the morning replayed in his mind, now stripped of its warmth, replaced by something artificial and rehearsed. The house felt unfamiliar, as if it belonged to strangers pretending to be a family. When dawn arrived, it brought no clarity, only a dull pressure in his chest that refused to fade. He moved quietly through the kitchen, listening to the soft rhythm of Catherine's movements upstairs, every sound sharpening his awareness. He watched her from a distance as she descended the stairs, her expression calm, almost serene. She greeted him the same way she always did, a gentle kiss on his cheek, a polite question about his day. Cole answered automatically, measuring every word, studying every gesture. Something had changed in him overnight. Trust no longer came freely. It had to be earned, examined, verified. After Catherine left the house, Cole sat alone at the dining table, staring at the space she had just occupied. The message she had received the night before echoed in his mind, though he didn't know its contents. He only knew the effect it had left behind. Her tension, her distraction, her fear. These were not coincidences, they were symptoms. And Cole had decided he would no longer ignore them. He logged into the phone account they shared, something he had never felt the need to do before. At first, everything appeared normal. Routine calls, familiar numbers. Then he noticed gaps, hours unaccounted for repeated calls to a number listed under no name. His jaw tightened as he copied it down. A quiet, focused anger replaced the confusion. He wasn't looking for proof yet. He was looking for patterns. Cole moved through the house with new eyes. He opened drawers he had never touched, checked pockets, scanned surfaces for details he once dismissed. In the bathroom trash, he found a receipt torn carefully in half. In the laundry, a blouse that smelled faintly of unfamiliar cologne. Each discovery felt like a small betrayal, insignificant alone, devastating together. The life he thought he knew was revealing its seams. By afternoon, his suspicion had hardened into resolve. He drove past places Catherine frequented, parking across the street, watching entrances, observing routines. He told himself he was being rational, that he needed clarity before confronting her. But deep down, he knew he was afraid of what clarity would bring. Knowing the truth meant losing the illusion that had protected him for years. That evening, Catherine returned home later than usual. She claimed traffic, a last-minute errand, an excuse delivered too smoothly. Cole nodded, pretending to believe her, while his eyes followed the way she avoided his gaze. Dinner passed in near silence, the tension thick enough to taste. Catherine checked her phone repeatedly, unaware that every glance only confirmed his fears. After she went to bed, Cole remained in the living room, the house dim and still. He sat with his thoughts, replaying every conversation, every unexplained absence. His love for Catherine had not disappeared, but it was now tangled with doubt and anger. He realized that whatever she was hiding was no longer contained. It was bleeding into their lives, poisoning every quiet moment. As Cole finally stood to turn off the lights, his phone vibrated softly in his hand. An unknown number had sent a single message. "You're closer to the truth than you think." He stared at the screen, heart pounding, knowing his suspicion had drawn someone else into the shadows, and the next move would be dangerous. The message on Cole's phone lingered in his thoughts long after the screen went dark. "You're closer to the truth than you think." He didn't reply. He didn't even save the number. Instead, he slipped the phone into his pocket and let the silence settle around him, heavy and deliberate. Someone else knew. That realization shifted everything. This was no longer just a private betrayal between husband and wife. It was a web, and Cole had stepped into it without knowing how far it stretched. Across town, Catherine sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel as Daniel slid into the passenger seat. The street was poorly lit, chosen deliberately, shadows swallowing the edges of the parked vehicles. Daniel smelled faintly of smoke and confidence, a combination that once excited her and now filled her with dread. She avoided his eyes, staring straight ahead, already regretting coming. "You took your time," Daniel said calmly, his tone edged with impatience. "I shouldn't be here," Catherine replied, her voice tight. "This is getting out of control," Daniel laughed softly. "It's been out of control for a while, you just don't like that you're not the one controlling it anymore." His words cut deeper than she expected. Catherine felt trapped, caught between fear and desire, between the life she had built and the one she was destroying. She told herself this would be the last meeting, that she would end it cleanly. But even as she spoke the words, she knew how fragile they were. Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Your husband is starting to ask questions." Catherine's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, smiling faintly, "you're not as careful as you think." The power dynamic had shifted, and Catherine felt it acutely. Daniel was no longer just a secret lover, he was a liability, a threat. She realized with a sickening clarity that he enjoyed this. Her fear, her desperation, the leverage he held over her. When she pulled away, he let her go too easily, which frightened her more than resistance would have. Unseen from across the street, Cole sat in his car, watching Catherine's vehicle. He hadn't planned to follow her, but instinct had overridden restraint. The sight of Daniel entering the car confirmed everything Cole had feared. His chest tightened as he watched them talk, the intimacy unmistakable even from a distance. Every laugh, every gesture felt like another wound. Cole didn't approach. He stayed where he was, forcing himself to observe, to remember, to gather. He raised his phone and took a single photo, hands steady despite the storm inside him. This was no longer suspicion. It was proof. And yet, instead of relief, he felt something darker settle in its place. When Catherine finally drove away alone, Daniel lingering behind, Cole waited. He watched Daniel light a cigarette, checking his phone, glancing around as if aware he was no longer invisible. Their eyes nearly met across the street, and for a brief, charged moment, Cole wondered if Daniel recognized him. If he did, he showed no sign. Later that night, Catherine returned home quietly, slipping into bed beside Cole, who pretended to be asleep. Her body was tense, unfamiliar. Cole lay rigid, staring into the darkness, replaying the image of her in the car with another man. Love and anger collided inside him, creating a volatile mix he could barely contain. Catherine closed her eyes, tears slipping silently onto the pillow. She knew she was losing control, that Daniel was no longer just part of her secret life, but a force threatening to destroy everything. She had crossed a line she could not uncross. In the early hours of the morning, Cole quietly unlocked Catherine's phone using a code he had memorized years ago. A new message glowed on the screen, unmistakable and damning. In that moment, he knew the confrontation he had been avoiding could no longer wait. The glow of Catherine's phone cut through the darkness like a blade. Cole stared at the screen, his thumb hovering as if the truth might vanish if he didn't touch it. Daniel's message was brief, intimate, unmistakable. There was no room left for doubt, no space for excuses. Cole felt something inside him harden, a quiet resolve forming where denial once lived. He locked the phone, placed it back exactly where he found it, and lay still until morning, his mind racing through every possible outcome. When dawn arrived, it brought no peace. The house felt tense, charged with words that had not yet been spoken. Catherine moved through the kitchen carefully, sensing the shift even if she didn't understand it. Cole watched her in silence, noting how she avoided his eyes, how her hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee. The normal rhythms of their marriage felt rehearsed, brittle, one wrong move away from shattering completely. "Did you sleep okay?" Catherine asked softly. "Not really," Cole replied. His voice was calm, too calm. The answer lingered between them, heavy and unresolved. Catherine nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Cole finished his coffee without another word, then stood. "We need to talk tonight," he said, meeting her gaze fully for the first time that morning, her breath caught. "About what?" "You know," he said simply, and walked out the door. The day crawled by for both of them. Catherine's thoughts spiraled, replaying every mistake, every risk she had taken. Daniel's words echoed in her mind, tangled with Cole's quiet certainty. She considered calling Daniel, then stopped herself. This was no longer something she could manage alone. Whatever Cole knew, whatever he suspected, the moment she had feared was finally here. That evening, the house was cloaked in darkness. Cole turned off the lights, leaving only the faint glow from the hallway. Catherine stood near the couch, arms crossed tightly around herself as if bracing for impact. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive, until Cole spoke. "How long?" he asked. Catherine swallowed hard. "I don't know what you mean." Cole stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Don't do that," he said quietly. "Not now." Her defenses crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes as she shook her head. "I never meant for it to happen," she whispered. "I didn't plan this." "Who is he?" Cole asked. The question landed like a blow. Catherine hesitated, then answered, her voice barely audible. "Daniel." Cole exhaled slowly, as if releasing weeks of tension in a single breath. "I saw you," he said, In the car, I read the messages, I know everything. Catherine's legs gave way, and she sank onto the couch, sobbing openly now. I'm sorry, she cried. I didn't want to hurt you, I didn't know how to stop. Cole's anger flared, sharp and sudden. You didn't know how to stop, he repeated. You lied to me every day. You looked me in the eyes and lied. I was scared, Catherine pleaded. I felt trapped, and then it just kept going. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house seemed to listen, absorbing the fallout of their words. Cole ran a hand through his hair, pacing, trying to contain the storm raging inside him. He loved her. That truth hadn't changed. But it now existed alongside betrayal, and the combination was unbearable. I don't recognize you anymore, he said finally. I don't know who I've been married to. Catherine looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. I'm still me, she said. Just broken. A sudden knock at the door shattered the fragile stillness. Both of them froze, eyes snapping toward the sound. The knock came again, louder this time, insistent. Catherine's face drained of color as a terrible realization dawned on her. Cole moved toward the door, heart pounding, while Catherine whispered a single word in terror. Daniel. The knock echoed again, sharp and deliberate, slicing through the fragile silence of the house. Cole's hand hovered near the door, his instincts torn between anger and caution. Catherine stood frozen behind him, her breath shallow, eyes wide with fear. She knew that knock. She had heard it before, late at night on streets far from home, when secrecy felt thrilling instead of terrifying. Now it sounded like a warning bell. Cole opened the door just enough to see who stood on the porch. Daniel's face emerged from the shadows, calm, almost amused, as if he had every right to be there. The porch light cast harsh lines across his features, revealing none of the uncertainty Catherine felt. We need to talk, Daniel said evenly, his eyes drifting past Cole toward Catherine. Cole stepped fully into the doorway, blocking Daniel's view. You've said enough already, he replied. His voice was controlled, but beneath it simmered a violence he barely recognized in himself. Daniel smiled faintly. This doesn't concern you. Cole let out a short, humorless laugh. You're standing on my porch, it concerns me. From behind him, Catherine found her voice at last. Daniel, please, she said, stepping forward despite Cole's outstretched arm. You can't be here, you're making everything worse. Daniel's gaze softened briefly, then hardened again. You don't get to decide that anymore. The tension drew attention. A porch light flicked on across the street, and a curtain shifted in a neighbor's window. Catherine felt the weight of exposure settle heavily on her chest. This was the life she had risked, now bleeding into the open, dragging innocent people into its wake. Cole closed the door firmly, turning to Catherine. Go upstairs, he said quietly. No, she replied, shaking her head. This is my mess too. Before Cole could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it at first, but the vibration came again, persistent. Catherine glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. The name flashing there wasn't Daniel's. It was Anna, Cole's sister. She's calling, Catherine whispered. Cole answered, dread tightening his chest. Anna, her voice came through tense and hurried. I was driving by and saw someone at your door. Is everything okay? She paused, then added, Cole, I've been worried. I've noticed things about Catherine, messages, late nights. I didn't want to believe it, but... That's enough, Cole said, closing his eyes briefly. I'll explain later. He ended the call and looked at Catherine, seeing the shame written clearly across her face. The damage was spreading now, touching family, neighbors, anyone close enough to notice the cracks. What had started as a secret between two people had become a fracture running through their entire lives. Daniel's knock came again, louder, more aggressive. You can't ignore this, he called through the door. You owe me, Catherine flinched. I don't, she said weakly. Cole placed a hand on her shoulder, steady but firm. This ends tonight, he said, one way or another. He opened the door again, stepping outside this time, forcing Daniel back with his presence. You leave, Cole said. Now, if you ever come near my wife again, this won't stay a private matter. Daniel studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You think this is over? He asked. You have no idea what you're dealing with. With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness as easily as he had entered their lives. Inside, Catherine sank onto the couch, trembling. Cole stood by the door, staring after Daniel, knowing with chilling certainty that the fallout was far from finished. As the house finally fell silent, Cole's phone buzzed once more. This time it wasn't a message, it was a location alert. Daniel had shared his whereabouts, and whatever he was planning next would force them both to confront the consequences of everything they had done. Cole stared at the glowing screen, the shared location pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark, demanding attention. An abandoned warehouse near the river. The kind of place that belonged to unfinished stories and bad decisions and regrets. Catherine stood behind him, wrapped in a sweater she hadn't realized she'd grabbed, her teeth chattering though the house was warm. She didn't need to ask where Daniel was. She already knew what this meant. "I'm going," Cole said quietly, already knowing the cost. Catherine stepped in front of him. "No, this is exactly what he wants." "What he wants doesn't matter anymore," Cole replied. His voice was calm, but it scared her more than if he had been shouting. "He's been controlling us for weeks. Tonight, it ends." The drive was silent except for the hum of the engine and the rain beginning to fall, thin needles against the windshield. The city lights faded as they neared the river, replaced by darkness and rusted silhouettes of forgotten buildings. Catherine's mind raced through every mistake she had made, every moment she had chosen secrecy over honesty. Each one felt heavier now, stacked against her chest. She wondered if guilt had a sound and if this was it echoing inside her ears. The warehouse loomed ahead, a massive shape swallowed by fog. Cole parked without turning off the headlights. For a moment, neither of them moved. Memories pressed in on him. Birthdays, quiet mornings, promises made without witnesses. Then Catherine reached for his hand. Her fingers trembled, searching for something familiar in a moment that no longer felt real. "I never wanted this," she said, tears streaking down her face. "I never wanted to hurt you." Cole looked at her, really looked at her, as if searching for the woman he thought he had married. "Intent doesn't erase damage," he said softly. "It only explains how it started." Inside, the warehouse smelled of damp concrete and oil. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. Their footsteps echoed as they followed the glow of a single hanging bulb. Daniel stood beneath it, hands in his pockets, as if he had been waiting patiently all along, perfectly at ease inside the chaos he had created. "You came," Daniel said. "Both of you, how poetic." "This ends now," Cole said. "You walk away or I call the police." Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "You think I'm the one who should be afraid?" He turned to Catherine. "Did you tell him everything about how you needed me? About the nights you said you felt invisible? About how easy it was to lie to the man who trusted you?" "Stop," Catherine pleaded. "Please, this isn't helping anyone." Daniel stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You already destroyed your marriage. I'm just holding up the mirror." Cole felt something snap inside him. He lunged forward, shoving Daniel back. The bulb swung wildly, shadows dancing across the walls. Daniel stumbled, hitting a metal table, and something clattered to the floor. A phone. Catherine recognized it instantly. "That's mine," she whispered, horror spreading through her chest. Cole picked it up, scrolling through messages, photos, voice notes. Proof, every lie documented, time-stamped, undeniable. Daniel smiled through a split lip. "Now you really do know everything, no more wondering." Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing louder. Catherine froze. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the sound, satisfied. She realized then that this night had never been about love or revenge. It had been about control. "I called them," Daniel admitted. "Someone had to tell the truth." Cole dropped the phone as if it burned. He backed away, hands raised as red and blue lights flashed through broken windows, painting guilt across every surface. Catherine collapsed to her knees, sobbing, as officers flooded the warehouse, their voices sharp and final. The night swallowed their past, sealing every mistake into an official record that could never be rewritten. Outside, the river kept moving, indifferent to the ruin left behind, carrying silence downstream. As they were pulled apart, Cole met Catherine's eyes one last time. There was no anger left there, only exhaustion, and a final understanding that nothing between them would ever be the same. In that look lived grief for what had been lost, and a quiet acceptance of consequences neither of them could escape. As Catherine was led away, she realized the truth had finally surfaced, but justice would demand a price neither of them had yet paid. Tonight. The interrogation room was colder than Catherine expected, its pale walls stripped of comfort and mercy. The hum of fluorescent lights pressed against her skull as she sat alone, hands folded tightly in her lap. Every sound felt amplified. The scrape of a chair in the hallway, distant footsteps, the rustle of paper. This was what truth sounded like when it had nowhere left to hide. Across the station, Cole sat in a similar room, staring at the one-way mirror as if it might answer him. The warehouse played on a loop in his mind. The swinging bulb, the phone in his hand, Catherine on her knees. He had thought knowing everything would bring clarity. Instead, it had only peeled back more layers, each one heavier than the last. Detective Harris entered Catherine's room without ceremony, a thick file tucked under his arm. He didn't rush, he didn't need to. "We've reviewed the messages," he said calmly. "The photos, the timeline." He paused, watching her face. This wasn't just an affair, it was ongoing manipulation. Catherine swallowed hard. Daniel controlled the narrative, she said quietly. He threatened exposure, he used my fear against me. And yet, Harris replied, opening the file, you kept going. The words landed with surgical precision. Catherine nodded slowly, tears slipping free. Because stopping meant facing what I'd done, and I was a coward. In the next room, another detective laid the evidence before Cole. Financial records, deleted emails. A burner phone purchased months earlier. Your wife wasn't the only one hiding things, the detective said. Daniel has a history, emotional coercion, previous complaints that never reached charges. Cole leaned forward. So he planned this. He escalated it, the detective corrected. Your confrontation gave him the opportunity. Hours blurred together as statements were recorded and contradictions exposed. Catherine learned Daniel had been preparing for weeks, quietly ensuring every message was backed up, every secret preserved. What she thought was intimacy had been documentation. What felt like love had been leverage. When they were finally allowed to see each other, it was in a narrow corridor lined with doors that never quite closed. Cole stopped a few feet away from her, uncertainty etched deep into his expression. Catherine searched his face for something familiar, but everything between them felt altered, rearranged by truth. I didn't know how to stop, she said softly. I thought if I could control it, it wouldn't destroy us. Cole exhaled slowly. You were protecting the lie, he said, not us. There was no anger in his voice, that hurt more. Charges were discussed in hushed tones. Daniel would face serious consequences, but Catherine wasn't untouched. Obstruction, failure to report threats. Every choice carried weight now, measured in legal terms instead of emotions. Justice, she realized, wasn't interested in intentions. By dawn, the station quieted. Rain streaked the windows as if the city itself were trying to wash clean. Cole stepped outside, breathing in air that felt sharper than before. His phone buzzed once, a notification from a lawyer recommended by his sister. Another door opening, another ending beginning. Catherine watched him from inside, separated by glass and consequences. She understood then that unraveling secrets didn't bring relief. It brought reckoning. Truth didn't restore what was lost. It clarified why it couldn't be saved. As officers led Daniel past her, his expression unreadable, Catherine felt nothing. No fear, no attachment, just the hollow certainty that every lie eventually demands witnesses. Outside, the sun began to rise, pale and indifferent. Cole turned away without looking back. Catherine closed her eyes, accepting that some truths arrived too late to forgive, but right on time to judge. As court dates were set and lives divided into before and after, one question remained unanswered. Who would ultimately pay the highest price for the truth now laid bare? The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old paper, a place designed to make decisions feel permanent. Catherine sat at the defense table, spine straight, hands still, listening as names and dates were read aloud like a ledger of her life. Cole occupied a bench behind her, close enough to feel present, far enough to feel unreachable. When their eyes met, neither nodded. Distance had become a language they both understood. Testimony unfolded with methodical cruelty. Screens lit up with messages Catherine had once typed in the dark, believing secrecy made them safer. Words she had softened with affection hardened under fluorescent lights, stripped of tone and context. Daniel's attorney framed her as complicit, willing, calculating. The prosecutor countered with timelines and threats, arguing coercion. Truth sat somewhere between, bruised and uncooperative. During a recess, Catherine watched Cole speak quietly with Anna near the windows. They leaned together like family does when bracing for weather. Catherine felt a strange gratitude that he still had that shelter. She had mistaken isolation for independence. Now she understood the cost of standing alone. Daniel entered escorted, wrists cuffed, expression flatter than memory. When he glanced toward Catherine, there was no triumph left, only the dull patience of someone waiting for a number to be assigned to his actions. She felt nothing again, and that absence frightened her more than anger ever had. The verdicts came in pieces. Daniel was found guilty on multiple counts related to coercion and harassment. A murmur rippled through the room. Catherine's charges narrowed, then remained. The judge spoke about responsibility, about choices made under pressure, about the difference between fear and necessity. Each word felt calibrated to leave a mark. Sentencing was postponed. Everyone exhaled without relief. Outside, autumn light pooled on the steps. Reporters called names, microphones blooming like flowers Catherine refused to smell. Cole waited until the questions thinned, then approached. He didn't touch her. "I'm filing," he said, not unkindly. "It's the only honest thing left." "I know," Catherine replied. Honesty felt heavier than any punishment. "I won't fight you." They stood there, married in name, divided in fact, sharing a moment that closed a door neither would reopen. Cole turned away, shoulders squared, choosing forward motion because stillness hurt too much. Weeks passed. Catherine moved into a small apartment with thin walls and thick silence. She learned the sounds of neighbors, the rituals of mornings built without compromise. Therapy became a map through damage she could finally admit existed. Some nights she slept, some nights she didn't. Healing refused schedules. A letter arrived bearing Daniel's handwriting, forwarded through attorneys. She didn't open it. She placed it in a drawer and locked it, a boundary she could enforce at last. Control, she learned, was quieter than obsession. On the morning of sentencing, Catherine dressed carefully, not for appearances but for steadiness. In the mirror, she practiced breathing until her reflection looked back without accusation. She was not absolved, she was accountable. There was a difference. In the courtroom, Cole sat farther away than before. The judge reviewed impact statements. Anna spoke briefly, voice steady. Catherine declined. Silence was her final testimony. As the gavel lifted, time narrowed to a thin edge. Whatever fell next would shape the rest of their lives. Catherine closed her eyes, ready to receive it. Beyond the doors, consequences organized themselves with bureaucratic precision. Paperwork multiplied, calendars filled, and reputations recalculated their value. Cole signed documents that converted years into clauses. Catherine met with probation officers who spoke gently and wrote firmly. The language of repair was procedural, unsentimental, relentless. Yet life persisted in ordinary details. Groceries needed buying. Rent arrived. A plant by the window leaned toward light without asking permission. Catherine learned to answer questions without embellishment, to sit with discomfort without reaching for escape. Responsibility became a practice, repeated daily, imperfectly. News of Daniel's sentence spread later, filtered through headlines that flattened complexity into certainty. Catherine read one article, then closed the browser. She understood now that stories end differently depending on who tells them, and justice rarely sounds like closure. On an evening thick with clouds, Cole packed the last box from the house they once shared. He paused at the doorway, remembering laughter caught in corners, arguments dissolved by morning. Then he turned the key and left it on the counter, an artifact of a life concluded. At night, Catherine dreamed of water moving steadily forward. In the dream, she stood on the bank, neither pushed nor pulled, choosing when to step. Waking brought the same choice again and again. The final hearing approached, and with it, a decision not written by any judge. Catherine folded a letter she had written to herself, placed it in her bag, and headed toward the courthouse. Whatever sentence fell. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post true crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay alert.